Thank you and welcome to Alice Corner right here at CCTV Channel 17. And today we have distinguished guests from Building Bright Futures, and soon we will allow them to talk about the great work that they do on behalf of children and families. And Anna and Beth.
Yes. Hello, I'm Beth Truzansky. I'm the Deputy Director at Building Bright Futures. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. So it seems that a lot of things happening within the organization, and maybe it will be good for our viewers also to understand a little bit of the historical perspective about BBF. What is BBF and what can you tell us about it? Maybe we start with Beth.
Sure. So Building Bright Futures is a somewhat unique organization in the state that we are a nonprofit organization with a small but mighty team. And the organization was started as a whole bunch of early childhood partners from pre-K teachers and people who worked for parent-child centers who came together and said, we really want to build a more integrated and coordinated system for our kids and families. And that includes from the prenatal period all the way through age 8, or about the 3rd grade period. So that work group worked very hard, and there were kind of councils across the state, and eventually the organization Building Bright Futures and the State Advisory Council was established in state statute by executive order from the governor, and serve as the primary advisors to the governor and the legislature on the well-being of children and families. So the organization, we are a nonprofit, but it's a public-private partnership, so we are working very closely with community partners across the state, as well as the legislature, the governor, and people who are working in various state agencies who are serving kids and families.
Amazing. And I heard that you talked about it was mandated by the governor or the legislator, right? And when was it, like around?
So there was an executive order in 2006 that established the State Advisory Council. And then in 2010, there was another act that really established BBF as the primary advisors to the governor and the legislature. So there's been kind of various steps. All through that time, there's been community engagement and what we call regional councils that mirror the 12 Agency of Human Services regions. And so people are coming together both at a regional and a state level to be able to work together, to be able to see what's working in terms of how we're serving kids and families and what's not, and what we can do about it.
Amazing, wonderful. And it seems, maybe we'll talk about it later, but before, it seems that you guys do a lot of great work, right? Including policy recommendation, and maybe Anna can tell us a little bit about, the process that you use to develop those policies, and what are the policies for this upcoming session?
Sure. So developing annual policy recommendations on behalf of the early childhood system is one of the many roles that Building Bright Futures plays, as Beth mentioned. It is part of our role in advising the governor and legislature on what the most critical priorities are for young children and their families at a given time. So we account for all sorts of things, what is most pressing and time sensitive in terms of what needs to be addressed in the system, what there might be momentum or political kind of viability around, and most importantly, what we are really hearing throughout the early childhood network that Building Bright Futures convenes. So that means kind of throughout the year, thinking about what we're hearing from regional councils, what we're hearing from our Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees, which really hold the content of the strategic plan and steward the sections of the strategic plan based on the goal, whether it be all children having a healthy start, whether it be kind of focused on early learning and development specifically. So we really look to those committees to help ensure that our priorities are aligned with what children and families and early childhood providers are hearing on the ground, and support them in developing annual policy recommendations that are reflective of those priorities.
Wow, this is a lengthy process to get there. And Bev, earlier you mentioned the State Advisory Council. How many people are in it, and how are they, selected to,
Yeah.
to serve in that role?
So the State Advisory Council, it's an early childhood state advisory council, again, that advises the governor, the legislature, and state agency partners on the well-being of children and families. The advisory council itself is made up of about half representatives from from state government that serve children and families, so Vermont Department of Health and Department of Children and Families, Agency of Education, for example, and then we have 13 kind of at-large non-agency members, and that includes family members who advise on what they are seeing and experiencing. It includes legislators. It includes people working with children and families, like at parent-child centers or Head Start. Or people in the medical profession or mental health. So we have representatives really from across all the settings that are serving kids and families across the state.
Amazing, wonderful. Yes. So Anna, maybe let's talk about the recommendation, the policies of this year, and also what's the role of the State Advisory Council once it's developed? Mm-hmm. Are they the one who accept it and recommend it, or how does it work? And what are the policies in 2025?
Yeah, so it's timely that we are having this conversation. Our State Advisory Council meets next Monday to ideally endorse the recommendations, and we'll have a final conversation about how the recommendations have evolved over the past couple of months based on the expertise and feedback of both State Advisory Council members themselves, as well as our broader community and networks. This year's recommendations include a variety of priorities that are really representative of the challenges that we are hearing from kids and families throughout the early childhood system, as well as the workforce. So it includes things like enact a paid family medical leave program that is universal and strong for the state of Vermont. It includes priorities related to mental health services and the mental health workforce, knowing that we continue to hear that post-pandemic, children and families are continuing to really struggle with issues related to their mental health. It also includes priorities related to housing, which is top of mind for many folks in our community. And we've actually already started to see some progress since our policy recommendations were developed related to the administration standing up some housing shelters specifically for families during these colder months. It also includes things like supporting early childhood educators with access to support services that we know kids need in order to prevent things like exclusionary discipline from being used. So they're really kind of broad and wide-ranging, but represent what we're hearing from communities.
Okay. Want to add anything? Good?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that the policy recommendations are developed with a lot of input from community members, that we really lean on people coming together monthly at our regional councils all across the state, that we really depend on people working with kids and families to then share with us what they see as both kind of the chronic issues that need some change, but also sometimes when there are acute issues that need, that information needs to get to the right people as soon as possible to try and make some change. So Building Bright Futures serves as kind of that liaison of information whenever it's needed. And the policy recommendations kind of emerge out of a lot of those discussions throughout the year, both at the regional council level as well as what Anna said is that we have state level committees that come together around kind of strategic topics and priorities. And so we then, around the summertime start to synthesize what have we heard, what are the emerging kind of opportunities to make policy change at the legislative level versus kind of advisement that might go to agencies about how they are administering programs or where resources might need to go. So that's really where the policy recommendations come from, and that's just one way that we are advising and trying to facilitate change among kind of lots of other, I would say that's the more formal way of advisement, and then there's lots of kind of less formal, whether it's meetings that we are facilitating or bringing information to leaders in the Agency of Human Services or Agency of Education or other departments that are kind of implementing programs to be able to make change in other ways where depending on kind of what level people need to be involved to make that change.
So it seems you rely on a lot of data in order to be able to craft those policies. But I wonder how many people work in the organization. Is it just you two, or it's just how many people? Like,
yeah, we're a small team of 17 right now. Okay. And that team is spread out between people who are doing regional kind of engagement work. We have a small data team that, because we are really working to use evidence and data to inform the advisement that we do. And then a small policy team, and then a small admin team. So not many folks working, but working hard to try and elevate community and family voice.
Yep. So what I have noticed, or I hear a lot from the people in the state, is they saying that basically all of this information or a lot of policies, anything that we develop is just through Chittenden County and area, Champlain Valley area. So, Anna, have you heard anything while developing these policies? Are they reflective to the entire state or just partial part of the state?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Ali. That is a big priority of ours, and I think that our work with regional councils in terms of understanding the diversity of challenges that our communities are facing is really central to us advising based on the needs of communities statewide versus, in central Vermont and in Chittenden County. This year's policy recommendations, I think, do really speak to issues broadly. And one thing that comes to mind for me is Building Bright Futures' role in continuing to center the needs related to our universal pre-K system and ensuring that there's equitable access to that system. We continue to hear from communities, particularly in the Northeast Kingdom, who are struggling within the current system to have access to universal pre-K, given that many of the K-12 schools that those folks access are actually across state lines, and there isn't a way in the current universal pre-kindergarten program for them to access that program in a similar way. So I think we've leaned into some challenging conversations around that and other issues, and this year's policy recommendations are illustrative of us continuing to elevate the need for equity in programs like pre-K.
Oh, interesting. Thank you again for those who are just joining us. VBF, VCAP, Engagement, Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan, and the policy recommendation that we just talked about with Anna and Beth Truszynski. Now maybe we can talk about the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan. So Beth, what is it? And also how people can be engaged or get involved, and what is also the timeline. Yes, so we may also have a couple slides to show as well.
Yeah, we're talking about kind of real big picture issues, and we can try and make them a little bit more concrete, but we do have some exciting things going on. So the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan was essentially created in 2013 initially, and every 5 years or so we go through a process to make sure that it is updated. The intention of the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan is the strategic plan that guides the work of the early childhood system. It identifies the priorities around our investments, around what we want to change so that we're better supporting kids and families. So it's a strategic plan. It is not Building Bright Futures plan, but we are charged to kind of hold it and steward it and monitor how we as kind of many early childhood people working with kids and families across the state are working to make the changes that we've identified. So some of those things have been like, the development and the implementation of pre-K, as Anna mentioned. So, when the plan was first passed, there was not universal access to pre-K, which is, kind of the formal education for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And since then, we have had bills passed and investments for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds to have access to at least 10 hours a week of pre-K. There's been expansion of kind of who has access to child care financial assistance programs, which is kind of the subsidy that families can have access to pay for child care. We have made changes in terms of how families access special education services and trying to improve early screening and development so that kids who may have kind of learning differences are identified as early as possible and can get access to those services. So essentially it guides the types of strategies that we want to make. So the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan essentially has 4 goals, everything from access to kind of education and health, to talking about how we use data, what data is available to inform decision making, and investment, where are our investments going. So right now we are in a process of yet again updating this plan, and we are engaging the community and families in terms of being able, there's that slide, to update this plan, because it is not about the policymakers just saying this is what needs to change. It is about families saying this is what's working or this is not what's working for our family and what we feel like needs to change. So we're gathering a lot of data and engaging families both through photo booths and asking questions. We will be hosting a series of kind of conversations with different groups in December, January, and February, and then moving into a drafting process to be able to bring a new strategic plan to the State Advisory Council for endorsement next fall. So that's the timeline that you're seeing. We have a lot planned because we really depend on making change that is informed by people who are in this, are part of the system, and also really want to focus on those who may be most distant from usually having those opportunities to engage. So. I would say we're in level 1, right in that middle, in that green block, starting to engage families at events on weekends or at their early care and education program or various community events at libraries. And then level 2 and 3 is a little bit more intensive with small groups. We'll be training community members to facilitate conversations. And targeting particular groups that we feel like are really important to gather their input, and then be able to write an informed plan.
Excellent. Wonderful. Wow. This is a long plan, and it seems from 2026 to 2030. Anything pertaining to children and families, the plan is there, and then you will be able to monitor it and move it forward. That's great. And there is also this component of equity that I hear, everything that you've been talking about, from the policy, from engaging, from geographic areas. I also saw a name of an organization, and it seemed that you guys have now an equity focus. Can you please tell us a little bit about who are the partners, what do you do, and why now? Why is it important to do that work now? Anyone can start.
Building Bright Futures is very committed to building a more equitable system. We believe that doing that, we need to do that personally as an organization, and then to be able to model that for the system. We are partnering with the Creative Discourse Group, which is a Vermont-based consultant team led by Nadia DeBose and Sue McCormick. And they are working with us both around our organizational equity work as well as kind of this process to engage community members to build more equitable community and family engagement through the VCAP update, as well as to make sure that equity is a component of the next strategic plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. I was just also wondering about, people who are wondering about how can I get involved, right? Do you have websites? And maybe Anna, yeah?
Sure. I can talk a little bit about kind of what to expect from the policy recommendations, and I'd love to touch on kind of how we thought about equity related to those as well and where folks can find those. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned earlier, Building Bright Futures policy recommendations will be endorsed next Monday by our State Advisory Council. A draft of those recommendations is available on Building Bright Futures website. There's a policy recommendation page. And soon we will be sharing what we call Building Bright Futures Policy Recommendation Playbook, which is really kind of digs deeper into the recommendations and is often contains a lot of the context that people are looking for when we talk about them. So it dives into what the policy recommendations mean, why they matter, and also this new piece that our partners have been really instrumental in pushing us to add this year, which we're calling a spotlight on equity. For each policy recommendation, really sharing and elevating some data about why the recommendation matters from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. And likely what that means is elevating the ways in which recommendations would actually have an outsized impact for communities of color, for people with disabilities, for again, populations that Beth noted that are historically furthest from justice and furthest from being served to the extent that they deserve to be. So that playbook I would encourage folks to check out and will be available in the next week and a half, and is also likely a good starting point for people looking to be involved in advocating for those policy recommendations.
Okay, wonderful.
There's lots of other ways to get involved, and can check out our website, buildingbrightfutures.org. We have a whole range of public committees and councils, whether it's at the regional level, regional councils, as well as we have a Families and Communities Committee. Most of those groups meet virtually, so depending, whether you're in Chittenden County or elsewhere in the state, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved, in addition to kind of the engagement opportunities that I outlined around the strategic plan update.
Okay. Wow, amazing. It seems this relatively small organization with 17 people doing great work, from data to policy to early childhood action plan, you name it. And it seems also that recently PBF also is doing the Vermont Early Childhood Fund, VECF, right? What is it? How much money are you giving to the people, and who is eligible to access those, etc.?
Yeah. The Vermont Early Childhood Fund is a way that we are trying to distribute resources to communities to respond to some of the needs that are identified to better support kids and families. It started out as a relatively small fund with philanthropic dollars distributing $100,000 or $200,000 and has grown tremendously in the last couple years through a large federal grant that Building Bright Futures is partnering with state agencies on. So we actually have been distributing up to $6 million over 3 years through the Vermont Early Childhood Fund. Many of those resources are coming into Burlington and Chittenden County area, as well as all across the state. And we are just about to make our third round of grants. So that is very exciting. The funding runs through the end of 2025. So being able to support community-based projects and in some creative ways.
Okay, this is great, and we hope that our viewers will check out the website, and it seems a new one will be coming soon, right? Yeah, BBF, buildingbrightfutures.org. I think that's the website. Okay. Yeah, and do you hear sometimes people asking you question about, okay, what's Let's Grow Kids and what is BBF? Do you hear that question a lot?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And it seems that organization, they're doing a little bit of advocacy, but when you develop the policies, do you just do you advocate for them too, or there is a difference between those two?
Sure. So I think one distinction is that Building Bright Futures is really kind of focused on the entirety of the early childhood system. And we know that that includes things like childcare, which Let's Grow Kids has done a wonderful job advocating on behalf of, but also things like health and developmental well-being, like access to prenatal care. It's this whole broad system, and that is really Building Bright Futures charge. And it's not just the youngest children, but it's also up to age 8, as Beth mentioned. In terms of the policy recommendations, Building Bright Futures really sees it as our role to advocate on behalf of the system, which is a form of advocacy. It just can look and feel a little bit different than some of our other really advocacy-oriented partners. But it does mean that we testify in front of the legislature when we're called to do so, and when they are considering bills or proposals that are related to both our policy recommendations as well as the data and stories that we're hearing that really tell us how children and families are doing in communities and what it is that they need.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And maybe, Beth, can you tell us a little bit about, I think you mentioned it, the state of Vermont children.
Yes.
Data.
Yep.
I mean, you guys do a lot of work. Oh, my God. Can you, what is that?
Yeah. So one of the things that Building Bright Futures is asked by the legislature every year is to issue a data report, essentially to say, what is the state of our children and families? And so BBF issues this annual data report and will be published in January. And that includes a ton of data, everything from access to vaccines to access to developmental screening to kind of children in state or under the supervision of Department of Children and Families. So there's a lot of data in there kind of covering that whole range of experiences that children and families go through in the course of growing up and transitions across programs. So the data book is a great resource. A lot of people use it to help write grants or just to understand kind of how are things going for our kids and families in this state. And then ideally, that data is being used to inform the changes that we are calling for.
Okay, wonderful. Is there a question that I did not ask that you see is so important for the viewers to know? Any of you?
I think we covered a lot. So I think it's really exciting, and there's lots of ways that people can be involved. It's pretty big picture stuff, so sometimes it's hard to get our heads wrapped around, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for the viewers, we are being joined by Beth Truzensky, Deputy Director of Building Bright Futures, and Anna Brulette, Policy Director of Building Bright Futures. And, I am also a BBF staff, for those who don't know. I am one of the regional managers covering Chittenden and Franklin Grand Isle. Well, one thing that I love about the organization is their mission and also the vision, well-being, and also, most importantly, the work-life balance, how people can do it in order to take care of themselves and be able to be taking care of others, right? Such a great organization, and it seems on their website there is a job description right there for the executive director. Check it out, apply, and I can promise you it's an honor.
Right, it's an administrative support for our executive director.
Exactly, yes. And hopefully in the future we'll have Dr. Morgan Crossman, and hopefully with the Secretary of Education to just talk about the bigger picture about education in general. All right. So this has been an honor to be here with Beth and also with Anna. Thank you all for joining us here today, and see you next month's Alice Corner. Thank you all so much.